The world didn't know her name, and she never needed it to. Elena Grace stood at the edge of Thornspire Hall, her fingers clutching a sheet of paper that had been folded and unfolded too many times. The ink, still legible, was soft at the edges now, as if even the words had absorbed her hope. It wasn't embossed, it wasn't gold-trimmed, just a handwritten note, sincere, grateful, and real. A breeze brushed past the grand marble steps, as though the city itself were trying to whisper courage into her ear. She adjusted the loose sleeve of her linen dress, smoothing it down gently, knowing it was out of place here, knowing she was out of place, but she'd come anyway, not for glamour, not for recognition, but for something simpler, something purer. The children, the ones who drew stars on worksheets with dull pencils, the ones who shared snacks at lunch because someone else forgot theirs, the ones who whispered dreams that the world had stopped listening to. For them, she had saved quietly, consistently, a few dollars from every paycheck. Coffee skipped, coats are worn longer than they should, all for a library, a breakfast program, and a warm pair of boots. And then one day, an envelope arrived, unexpected, almost misplaced among the bills and grocery receipts. It wasn't flashy, but it carried a name, hers, Dear Ms. Grace, your generosity moved us. Please join us at the Thornspire Charity Gala this Saturday evening. She read it 3 times, not because she doubted the words, but because she needed them to be true. Now, here she stood, under chandeliers that spilled gold onto the velvet dusk, under columns that gleamed like polished ivory, before doors were meant for people who'd never priced milk by the ounce. She didn't own pearls. Her flats had a small scuff on the toe. Her dress was soft, breathable, something she'd picked from a quiet boutique in Brooklyn that smelled of lavender and old stories. Still, she took a breath. She came for the children, and that had to be enough. As the glass doors of Thornspire Hall slowly opened with an expensive sigh, Elena Grace stepped forward into the light, unaware that within the next hour, a room full of strangers would try to break her, and fail. The moment she crossed the threshold, silence greeted her, not the kind wrapped in peace, but the kind sharpened by attention, not eyes, calculations. The Thornspire Ballroom was a cathedral of luxury. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath the soles of red bottom heels. Chandeliers hung like frozen rainstorms overhead, dripping light onto tuxedos tailored to fit ambition. Laughter glimmered like glass, the kind that cut. Elena moved like a whisper through it all. Her presence was soft, but in a place where softness had no currency, it made her invisible, or worse, it is noticeable in the wrong way. She paused near the entrance, her hands still holding the folded letter, its edges warm from the press of her palms. No check-in desk, no warm welcome, just a sea of glitter and glances, and a woman in a sleek black dress, heading her way. The hostess didn't smile. Not really. It was more a curve of protocol than of kindness. Her eyes flicked up and down, pausing at Elena's flats, her plain ivory linen dress, and the bun that left a few strands loose around her face. "Sorry," the hostess said, voice clipped like the hem of her own couture gown. "This is a private event. You might be looking for the kitchen entrance." Elena blinked once, then smiled politely. "I was invited." Elena Grace, a beat passed. The hostess tapped briskly at a tablet, its screen glowing cold blue. No record. "Please step aside for the real guests." Elena reached into her coat pocket and held out the letter. "It's here." The invitation. It was handwritten. That word alone drew a wince from the hostess. "We only accept digital check-ins." No printed stationery, especially not. She barely looked at the letter. It was as if Elena had handed her a napkin, scribbled in crayon. Around her, champagne glasses tilted midair, heads turned. Slowly, a murmur passed like static through the crowd. "Is that linen?" a woman in sapphire said, loud enough for Elena to hear. "Did she think this was a farmer's market?" her friend replied, clutching her sequined clutch. And suddenly, Elena's soft dress felt too loud. Her flats are too quiet. Her purpose is too small. But she held her ground, unsure whether to explain further or turn and disappear. The room had already been decided. The air turned thicker, not with perfume, but with disdain. A man in a velvet blazer stepped forward, whiskey glass swirling like his smirk. "Look at her. Playing the victim," he said, loud enough to ripple the violinist's tempo. Bet she wrote that note herself just to crash the party. The crowd laughed, not kindly, not humanly. Phones lifted, flashlights blinked. The spectacle had begun. A woman in gold, dripping with perfume and judgment, leaned in, her words laced with venom. "She's embarrassing herself. And us," another voice followed, mimicking Elena's soft tone in a high-pitched whine. "I'm invited." More laughter. Elena stood still. Her knuckles were white around the letter, her gaze fixed on the chandelier above, the only thing that didn't look away. She wanted to speak, to say, "I gave everything I had for this cause," to say, "I'm just a teacher," to say, "I'm human." But the words, heavy with dignity, stayed locked in her throat. The crowd smelled blood, and someone new had just caught the scent. Part 4. The Predator in red. Theme, power play, and public humiliation. Vanessa Laurie entered like a queen descending from marble clouds. Scarlet silk clung to her curves like fire. Diamonds danced along her neckline. Her blonde hair was sculpted like a weapon, and her eyes cold, calculating, found Elena with predator precision. "Sweetheart," she cooed, her voice honeyed but sharp. "This party isn't for people like you." She circled her, slow, deliberate, heels echoing like judgment against a stone. "This isn't a thrift store. You're out of your depth." And then, with a flick of her manicured hand, a tray of shrimp canopies accidentally tumbled from a waiter's arms, splattering red sauce across Elena's ivory dress. Gasps. Laughter. Cameras. Cruelty made viral. "Oh, clumsy me," Vanessa purred, not missing a beat. Elena's breath caught, not from embarrassment, but from the sting of disappointment, not in herself, but in them. Her hands trembled just slightly. Her dignity, still intact, now wore a stain, but her eyes never lowered. Vanessa smiled, triumphant. But even queens forget. The room always watches the fall. A hush fell for half a second, just long enough for the stain to spread across the linen. Then came the laughter, louder this time, unchecked, ugly. And from the back of the crowd, someone shouted, "She's a walking disaster." "Bet she's here for the free food." Another glass tipped. Champagne this time. It hit her sleeve, soaking through to her skin. The invitation crumpled slightly in her grip. She said nothing, not because she couldn't, but because no one was listening. And then, security. 2 men in black suits, jaws squared with a false sense of purpose. "Ma'am," the taller one said, his voice flat, "we've had complaints. You're not on the guest list." The second one stepped forward, broader, smirking. "We're going to have to escort you out." The taller man gripped her arm, not violently, but firmly. Firm enough to make it clear. She didn't belong here. "Let's go," he barked. "Stop stalling." Elena's heel caught on the polished marble. She stumbled slightly. A soft squeak that broke the violinist's rhythm. The crowd roared. Phones out. Laughter louder. Applause even. as if cruelty had become performance art. Someone tossed a napkin. It landed at her feet. "Pick it up, sweetheart," came a mocking voice, and the crowd howled. Still, Elena didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't beg. Her head remained high, and her lips parted just slightly. "There's been a mistake," she said quietly, holding out the letter once more. "If you'll just—" But the guards were already turning her toward the doors, and the marble stretched before her. Like a trial, the music stopped. It didn't fade, it broke. Because from the other side of the room, a voice rang out, clear, deep, cold as steel. "She's with me." The crowd froze. The guards froze. Every champagne glass stilled mid-air. And then he appeared, a tall man in a tailored black suit, his steps deliberate, his presence undeniable. The air bent around him as he moved. Not just wealthy, not just powerful, but known, feared. Alexander Hawthorne, the tech billionaire who never attended events, a ghost in the world of empires, a myth in his own industry. But he was here, and his eyes, those steely grey eyes, were locked on her. He crossed the floor without hesitation, his voice once more cutting through the silence. "This is my wife." Gasps. Actual, audible gasps. He reached her side, his hand finding hers. Steady, warm, grounding. "She is Elena Grace Hawthorne, the woman you just humiliated, the woman who gave her life to children while you drank champagne and laughed at her shoes." No one moved. No one dared. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Every word fell like a gavel. Vanessa Laurie's smile shattered like crystal. Her diamonds dimmed beneath the weight of his words. The hostess trembled, tablet forgotten in her hands. The woman in emerald silk, the one who spilled wine, backed toward the shadows, her glass abandoned. Alexander's eyes swept the room, slow and final. "You judged her," he said, "by the price of her dress. You mocked her for the softness you could never understand. She gave everything she had. You gave nothing but scorn." And silence answered him. Phones lowered, eyes dropped, hearts shifted, because the room knew now what they'd done, and more terrifying, who they'd done it to. Vanessa's phone buzzed in her clutch. One message, then another. A board member, a brand deal, gone, gone, all gone. She tried to toss her hair, to laugh it off, but her hand trembled. She was no longer the predator. She was the warning. Alexander turned to Elena. His voice softened into something only she could hear. "You okay?" She nodded. A gentle curve of her lips. No rage, only grace. He led her back into the ballroom, and this time the crowd parted for her, not out of kindness, but reverence. Elena walked slowly, her dress still stained, but it no longer looked ruined. It looked righteous. At their table, draped in white silk and orchids, Alexander pulled out a chair for her, a quiet, elegant claim of her place. She sat, hands folded, the letter still in her grasp. The gala resumed, but nothing was the same. Laughter was tight, conversations forced, and not a single eye could look her way. With ease, she had not shouted, she had not fought, she had simply endured, and they had collapsed beneath her silence. The auction began. Weekend yacht retreats, diamonds, private jets, egos danced, flexed, and raised paddles. Elena watched, face serene, and then the MC announced, "A donation, one that will change lives." A teacher gave everything she had for the children we aim to serve tonight. Clara Voss, from the charity board, took the stage. She asked to remain anonymous. "But we want to acknowledge her, because real generosity doesn't wear sequins." Polite applause, thin clapping, but none of it mattered to Elena. She didn't rise. She didn't wave. She simply whispered, "Acknowledge the children. They're the ones who matter." And Clara, tears in her voice, obeyed. As the evening waned, Elena and Alexander walked out of the ballroom together. The crowd no longer mocked. They watched. Alexander paused at the doors, pulling something from his coat, a small bouquet of sunflowers, bright, warm, unapologetic. "Like her, you don't need to shine," he said. "You are the light." She took them, and with one last breath, she stepped into the cool night, not broken, not bitter, just whole. By morning, everything had changed. Companies tied to the loudest voices at that gala, blacklisted, contracts severed, shares plummeted. Apologies flooded her inbox, none of which she read. The man in the velvet blazer, ousted. The woman in emerald silk, cancelled. The world had mistaken silence for weakness, but in the end, it was silence that brought them all down. And Elena, she just went home to make lesson plans, to read bedtime stories, to teach. Because while the world now knew her name, she had never needed them to. She had always been enough. Let me know if you'd like a full cinematic video script version or a voiceover-ready narration from this 10-part structure. This story is ready to move hearts